Today on the DML News podcast, we're going to talk about the war on cops. What's changed since yesterday? What's going to look like tomorrow? We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the importance of family. Do people want crime? Or do they want things to be settled again? We're going to talk about a lot of stuff with my buddy Gav, who's been friends with me since I've been a little guy. And we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, and it's going to be all
unfiltered.
Dennis Michael Lynch gives you his word, and he will never let you down. He will always fight for America.
The only one who really puts his money where his mouth is Dennis Michael Lynch.
Hello, I'm Dennis Michael Lynch, and I thank you for joining me today. With me is my buddy Gav. We've been friends for a very long time. We're going to get to that in a moment. But with all that's happened in the last week, a lot of changes are taking place. People are frustrated. A lot of bad people have been removed from office in terms of people said, the hell with you, I'm electing somebody else. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about things that matter most in the world of family here in the United States. Do we have the opportunity now with the new Trump administration to bring back what I like to talk about, which is the days of the white picket fence? And so there's nobody better to do that with than my buddy Gav. So you could bring him in here. You could show him, Ryan. So Gav and I, although you and I may differ on this story, but before we go into it, I almost forgot we're going to drink some wine.
Okay.
And we use the wine clip. You want to tell people about that you were around since the beginning of the wine clip, Gav?
So I think, when Dennis started getting into his filming and doing videos and stuff, he had a little testimonial video that he made actually. I think it was at Grumman, like a Grumman studio or something on Long Island where we used to live.
Yeah.
And myself and my wife were part of that. And
in the taste test video.
It was a taste test video. We had a lot of fun. It was almost like the Pepsi challenge.
Well, now, so we could toast to, so I met you in the seventh grade. So how many years is that? Because you're better with this stuff than I am.
So I was thinking about that. It's hard when you have to do math without using a calculator these days. But I guess we're 55 years old. So maybe 12, so
45, 43 years. There you go.
And here we are, still going strong.
You knew my boys when they were born.
Sure. It's funny how things go in life. Here we are sitting together, and you got both your kids here, who turned out to be great young men.
Not so good on the softball field, though.
I think Danny just turned 29 years old. Ryan is 24? My kids are 28 and 26, so we've kind of come full circle.
Yeah. I mean, a kid about the softball team. So we decided, actually, Ryan wanted to put together a softball team. Or actually, Ryan just wanted to start playing softball because here where we are, there's not a whole lot of young kids. It's a little bit of an older city. And so the idea was that he was going to play softball. And then the idea popped up one night when we were at dinner. And of course, I just couldn't let things be as they were. And I said, Ryan, why don't we start a softball team? And I'll sponsor it and we'll get a bunch of guys. So lo and behold, we put together this softball team. And Gav used to be the pitcher of our softball team when we were 24 years old. And so we just put you back on the mound. And you haven't pitched softball in how many years?
It's got to be like 30 years.
30 years.
30 plus years.
So our first, Rye, to get me if I'm wrong, I'll write on this. So our first, what have we played so far? 4 games? What would you guess? 4 games so far. What are the scores so far that we've lost? We're 0-4.
I can look up the scores if you give me like 2 minutes.
No, off the top of your head. I know one game was 24-1. We lost.
Oh, I mean, I think one game. Yeah, I think we've lost, or every team scored at least 15
runs on us.
No, I think the first week we were a little overwhelmed because I think we did play some guys that could really hit the ball
and much younger.
I think the second game last week,
we almost won.
We had a short team also, and I thought we pretty much held our own. I mean, nobody was hitting it over the fence. But, everybody was, getting it over the infield into the outfield, and we scored some runs. Unfortunately, I think like 5 people got injured, including myself. And then when I tell people I pulled my hamstring, and they're looking at me like, why are you playing softball? You shouldn't be doing that.
It's funny. After the first game, we got, actually after the first week, actually we did not bad in the first game. The funny thing is that we go to play a team that's been together for like 20 years. Our guys, half our guys, meet each other for the first time in the parking lot.
Right.
So we have a team that half the guys don't even know each other's first names. So I think we lost that game like 15-8. It wasn't all that bad. The next game we played, there wasn't a single guy on the team who spoke English.
Yeah, they're straight out of the DR for sure.
DR, the Dominican Republic?
Yeah, they had the matching uniforms. They looked like a AAA team.
Yeah, I think they were more straight out of They Come to America 1, 2, 3, and 4. In fact, I think the shortstop was in my
that
first
it was,
film.
guys that, came from Cuba, didn't make it in the major leagues, and they formed the softball team. Yeah. Honestly.
These guys were unbelievable. In fact, just to put it down, and then we'll skip softball and we'll get into some other interesting stuff. But so we lose our first game 15-8, and then we play the second game. It's double headers every night, but you only play for 1 hour. And at the end of the hour, whatever inning you're in, that's the last inning. So in the first game, I think we got to like the 5th inning, and then the 5th inning end, and you didn't get to play 7, but that's it. You got to move on. I look at my watch, and I look, and at the bottom of the first, because we were up the first, we led off the top of the inning. We scored 1 run. And I'm like, oh, this ain't got to be bad. And then they got up. 50 minutes into the game, we're still in the bottom of the first because they scored 19 runs. We lost that game 20. They mercy ruled us 24-1.
I think there was a rule: if you hit more than 5 home runs in an inning, it's an out. So that was kind of a joke. I think one guy batted lefty and he got a double.
Right. He was the guy was up as a righty. Yeah. He batted around like twice each, and then he batted up lefty. He still hit a double.
Still hitting better than half our team.
And I'm pitching, and it's a little frustrating, but whatever. And just swing. These guys scored 19 runs in an inning. The guy's taking a walk. So I'm like, should I be mad right now? Should I just laugh about the whole situation?
I wasn't playing. I didn't play because I had hurt myself at pickleball of all things the day before. And I'm sitting in the dugout laughing my ass off to the point of tears were coming down because you guys were getting beat up so bad. And then when they would finally hit like an easy fly ball, we got the one guy out in left field who tells me he's been playing. I meet this kid 5 minutes before, right, Ryan? We meet him 5 minutes before we're playing because he signed up. He actually did what Ryan wanted to do. Ryan wanted to just sign up as a free agent for a team who he knew nobody and just be like, hey, you know what? I played high school ball, could have played college ball, but I'm really good. This guy tells me I've been playing since I'm 5 years old. And I'm like, oh, this guy's got to be pretty good. And every time little fly ball would go to left field and Gav would think he was out of the inning, Joey would drop it.
He definitely lied on his resume.
He lied on his resume, that's right.
And just one more thing on the softball. We could talk about that the whole time. But, I'm out there pitching and I see like this net next to the pitcher's mound, and I'm like, what is this? I don't need no net. Until like the third pitch, when one came about 100 miles an hour, whizzing past my head, and I barely ducked and got behind that net. Thank God that net was there.
Yeah. So what they do now is they put, but you know what? This kind of like goes a little bit, that's a good lead way, because this goes a little bit into the world we live in now. So what Gav's talking about is, back in the day when we were playing softball, the pitcher would be on the mound, and you knew that after you pitched it, you had to be sitting like in a cat-like position because that ball could be coming back at you, like I said, at 100 miles an hour, and you got to catch it. Now, what they do is they've sort of pussified the whole thing, and now there is a screen. They have a screen net, to where you kind of like pitch to the side of it, and then you run behind it, so this way you don't get hit with a line shot back. Now, to somebody whose reflexes may be a little slower at 55, that could be what you would call a safety net. But I just think it just waters down the game itself, because unlike you, the majority of people that we played against, are not on the mound at 55 years old. These guys are 25 and 30, and they should be able to catch a ball that's lined back to them. But this is the world we live in, Gav. Everything's gone to the point of where everybody needs a safe space.
Well, I was just going to say that, this could be the participation trophy. Everybody gets one, or it's liability. The town or the city that's running this league, they don't want liability. We got to put this net here. And, of course, they don't want anybody to get hurt, but that's probably 3 on their list.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. So speaking about that, so Gav, for those of you who don't listen to me all the time or can't remember, Gav spent over 20 years as a New York City Police Department officer. I think, would you get to lieutenant?
Lieutenant, 26 years was total. Actually, I retired. The end of this month will be 8 years since I've been retired, believe it or not.
All right. So he was a great cop. In fact, you were at the latter part of your career. You were one of the people in charge of Citi Fields, where the New York Mets play, right?
Correct.
So what was sort of your objective, or what was your job title when you were there? Like, what did you have to do?
At Citi Field, you're talking about?
Yeah.
We basically policed the game, a lot of traffic control, any incidents in the stadium, and just basically support the overall security of the New York Mets during game days.
So let's talk about this for a moment. So, and on top of that, now your son, you were mentioning that you have two kids. You have a daughter and a son. It's funny. It's amazing. The Gav and his wife, Nina, have been together forever, just like Mary and I. And so Gav was a cop and Nina's a nurse. And now John's two kids, his son is a cop and his daughter's a nurse. So kind of nice how that worked out. But when you look at policing today, and you're still familiar with it because your son is a New York City cop today, when you compare it to what it used to be like from the perspective of performing your job as a cop, what is the big difference today compared to yesterday?
Well, basically, they've almost taken your ability away to
Talk
actually.
a little louder.
They've almost actually taken the ability away to be a police officer. It's a lot of it's technology driven too, but just they've changed the rules where it's almost like you're the police officer, they're there to protect and serve, but they don't really want you to protect and serve.
What do they want you to do?
They want you to do nothing really. Just
So give me an example. So let's say, for instance, I'll set up the scenario for you. You tell me how it would work in your day, and then tell me how it works today.
well.
So let me give you an example. So you get a call. There is a brawl. Two white guys are fighting two black guys outside a bar, maybe a little bit drunk. Everybody's the beer muscles are on. And in the old day, you and your partner come up and all the participants tell you to go F off, cop. How would you guys have solved that problem yesterday?
Well, most of the times we would grab those people, maybe depending on what age they are. Maybe, I don't want to say smack them, but
In their 20s, big guys, 20s. They're fighting, they're brawling.
what are we doing here, guys? Maybe it's time to go home.
And I say, screw you.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you show up, everybody's got their phones out, they're videoing you.
No, but back in the day, there were no phones.
Right.
So if let's just use me. I'm brawling with a guy. It's a black guy, me, and I'm only using the race thing because I think it changes today. But there's a black guy and me, we're both fighting. We're both in the wrong. Forget about who's wrong, who's right. You and your partner come and try to stop us. We both tell you to go F yourself and maybe even go to get a little aggressive with you. What would you have done to us back in the day?
Maybe figuratively kick you in the ass,
Yeah.
And hey, let's call it a day. Get out of here. Let's go.
And I still say to you, go F yourself. I mean, are you guys going to throw me to the ground? Maybe get the cuffs on?
Potentially, yeah,
So I'm ultimately going to get roughed up a little bit.
a little bit.
Rightfully so.
Right.
Okay. Maybe if nobody was looking, get a little baton in the side of my rib cage.
Maybe,
Okay.
hypothetically.
Hypothetically. You never did that.
Never.
Now, today, you walk into that same situation. What happens?
Well, let's not forget now, I talk about technology. All cops have, body cameras now.
Yeah.
So as soon as you show up at that scene, those body cameras are rolling, which could be good or bad. Everybody fought the body cameras, but the body cameras tentatively have kind of worked out, especially when people do make allegations. But, right away, everybody's got their own videos out. And, when you trying to play nice, hey guys, let's break it up. And maybe somebody mouths off and then you get a little loud. Next thing you know, the crowd comes out and now it's us against them. They've created a scenario where it's now always us against them. Not like, hey, we're here to try to help and, quell a situation and, move everybody along. It's not like that anymore.
So in the scenario of yesterday's fight, right, back when you were on force, let's say, for instance, the black guy in this particular case is beating me in the fight, all right? And you go to grab him off first and you throw him to the ground, you lock him up, and then I get locked up too because I tell you to go fuck off as well. Today, if he and I are in the fight and he's winning that fight and you go and grab him first, am I right in saying one of the things that you may be up against is that they're going to racial profile it, that you went after the black guy before you went after the white guy?
Absolutely. Because especially, if they get arrested, maybe he gets a little lumped up and next thing you know, it becomes a race issue. Like, why did you have to grab that guy first? Why couldn't you grab that guy? So it's always a racial overtone.
Do you know, or maybe I'm asking you a question you don't know, but do you know why and when that changed?
I think it's kind of always been like that, but it's more, again, it's a lot of, it's because it's more, back then it could say, he said, she said, but, today with the technology, it's just, somebody might have a video of it and then the news is going to show a clip. Oh, look, the cops came in here and just grabbed this guy and put the cuffs on him, but they don't show the whole scenario. Right.
They're just going to be selective in their editing.
Correct.
When I look at this stuff, because Denny and I and Ryan are covering this all day long, and Denny is also here, so he'll weigh in at some point. But when I look at these videos, to your point, it used to be if you showed up to that bar scene and myself and the black guy were both kind of cocktailed, we're having a brawl, and we're in the wrong. There's no doubt we're in the wrong. You guys are the authority. You tell us to stop. We don't stop. People are watching. In those days, the people that were watching did not jump in. They were afraid of what the repercussions would be if they actually tried to assist in hurting a cop. And if you were going to arrest us, we got arrested and that was it. Today, as you said, that crowd may actually turn against you. So today, instead of just trying to split Dennis and Joe from having a brawl, today what's wound up happening is now you've got to worry about Dennis and Joe and the people who are in the background, not only filming you, but they may come out and now start fighting against the cops. That change right there, that disrespect for cops, is that because the people who would participate in being against you have been empowered by what they've seen to be anti-cop, in the sense that they don't fear that there will be any repercussions?
Absolutely. There's no repercussions. Even if they're on video and you see people all the time, the police are trying to arrest somebody, and you'll see somebody from the crowd come in and try to grab the cops off, not because they think they're hurting them, because they're trying to help the person that's getting arrested.
Right.
Because there's no consequences. Even if when police officers get assaulted, there's, you would think that's an automatic felony. No, sometimes they just charge a misdemeanor or they'll just disorderly conduct and nothing. There's no consequences.
Do you think the cops today, let me ask you a question differently. When you were a cop, and especially when you were a lieutenant, you were in charge, right? Did you feel as if your commanding officer had your back, and did your guys that were under you as a lieutenant always feel as if you had their back?
100%. That's just the kind of person I was.
And when you looked up to leadership, the command sergeant and even the chief of police, did you feel as if there was a lineage that said the cops would be protected?
Well, there was always a wave of sometimes, where you felt you were going to be supported and when you weren't going to be supported. And it was always, a political thing.
So today, if a cop is in the same situations that you were in, is it fair enough to say that that cop is going to question whether or not he's going to be protected from the people at the top?
Absolutely. 100%.
Is that because the people at the top have a political agenda, or is that because everybody at this point is trying to cover their own ass?
I think it's a little bit of both.
All right.
You know, they don't want to look bad to the public, and you know, they just may believe that's just, you know, that's the way they think and believe.
So I want to take you to L.A. Over the last couple of years, you know, I asked you the question, and I know it's such a hard question because I don't know if anybody really has the answer for it. I think it really dates back to Obama, to be honest. I think Obama created a new temperature in this country to where he supported the idea that cops are pigs. He didn't necessarily come out and say it, but, you know, when you look back on Ferguson, right?
I was going to just bring that up.
Go ahead. So
You know, that's where I think a lot of this stuff started, was in Ferguson, because of that whole incident. And a lot of the stuff that came out from that is, you know, why do they have all this military type gear, you know, where, you know, they have all these heavy weapons and these big armored vehicles, you know, why do they have that? That this is like the military. So there was a big movement to try to take these things away from the police. But, you know, people weren't seeing the bigger picture back then, where you were getting like these mass shootings and stuff, where we need these heavy weapons and stuff because we may have to respond to an active shooter. And we got to have the right tools to police it, to you know, end it.
So what they were trying to do is they were trying to sell a storyline that the cops were now going over the top and trying to militarize the streets of Main Street.
Correct.
All right. So now you don't think that's true.
Absolutely not.
No.
No way.
Most cops don't think that's true. Is it fair to say that the majority of police officers aren't looking for confrontation?
Nobody looking for a confrontation. They want to go to work. They want to do their job. And they want to go home at the end of the night to their families. That's what it was always all about.
You know, when you I mean, Mary's family is filled with firemen. Your brother was a fireman. If you ask a fireman whether or not they want to go into a busy or a slow district, they say they want to go into a busy district. They want to go out and put out fires. You know, they sort of get bored if the bell never rings, there's no fire. As a cop, I imagine your thought process may be a little different in the sense that you don't want to necessarily be in Hell's Kitchen or the worst part of LA because you got to worry about getting shot.
There's a couple of different schools on that. You know, some of the very active cops, you know, when they're young, they believed, oh, you should go work in bad areas. That's how you learn the job correctly. And there are some that think, why do you want to go work there? Why don't you go work in the slowest precinct that you can? Because every 2 weeks, that paycheck's going to be the same no matter what. And you won't be in harm's way.
But unlike the fireman who wants to have a fire every night, would you say the majority of cops don't want to be in a firefight?
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, it's highly dangerous. It's one thing when you're putting out a small fire or something else. I mean, there's always a risk for a fireman to die, but I think the risks are a little bit higher when you're going into a bad area and you know that you're going to wind up finding gangs that are going to have AR-15s.
100%.
Okay. So then when you look at that and you date it back to Ferguson and this swing in opinion from have respect for cops. See, like I go back to use that story I gave you of me and the guy Joe fighting outside the bar. Even if I had cocktails, it was so ingrained in me that if a cop told me to stop, I stopped. If a cop told me, you know, I'm getting arrested, not that I was ever in that situation, but I'm not going to resist. And at some point, it switched to where you should resist, you should push back. And I think that started in the Obama regime, if you want to call it that. And then it was almost like Obama gave the license to go to war on cops. And then you had the whole movement with the NFL, with Colin Kaepernick taking the knee, and the storyline that all cops are bad. And it was like it just flowered. And then it was like this war on cops. And then all of a sudden, George Soros gets involved in this and starts funding all these horrible DAs. And that's where I'm saying, like, the shift from you knew when you were doing your job, when you went in there to stop that fight or wherever it was, you didn't have to second think whether or not, oh boy, if I arrest these people and put cuffs on them, I may lose my job, my pension, I may lose my freedom. because you didn't think you had a DA that was going to sit there and his objective was to put you in jail for carrying out your job. Today, that's what, or at least it was, what cops had to deal with. So do you agree with that?
I agree with it. And, going back to Obama's story, if you recall, I think it was an African-American professor. There was a call, I think, there was a burglary. I don't know if he forgot his keys, and he was on the porch of his house, and the police showed up, and they were just trying to question him, and he was very aggressive toward them, and they wound up, putting the handcuffs on him. And I remember that whole thing. They all sat down and they had a beer together. Do you recall that?
I think so. Go ahead.
So, it's just these cops showed up. They're responding to potential burglary in progress. And again, you could go back to race.
Yeah.
He was a black man. He had the white cops. So, of course, now it's that whole everything's about race.
Yeah.
And it's gone off the rails.
And they try to drive it home that way. So through Barack Obama, I think the attitude changed. And then it went to George Soros funding these radical DAs. And there was nobody more radical than the DA in L.A., Los Angeles, California. Dennis, what was that guy's name, and what do we know about him, and what just happened to him?
His name is George Gascon. He is the Los Angeles County District Attorney. He's been there for quite some time, and he's mostly ridiculed for public safety concerns because a lot of his policies are soft on crime. He's against the death penalty, ending cash bail for nonviolent felonies. He's also known for helping reduce the sentencing of some of the worst criminals in the city. There's been recall attempts against this guy. He finally has been just voted out, but he has like a whole long list of just being a very soft on crime candidate for the city.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't just lose this election. He got his ass kicked.
Yeah.
Right? I think it was almost 20
Landslide.
points.
Yeah.
So the pendulum appears with Trump's victory and this guy's loss, that Americans are back to the point of saying, we want law and order. We want the rule of law. When you see that sort of thing, why do you think that is? Why do you think that most people are saying enough is enough?
It's gotten so bad, and California, along with voting him out, they had a couple of amendments on their ballot. One specifically was shoplifting. So in New York, we call it petty larceny or shoplifting. You go into a store and you steal items. So under 1,000 in New York is a misdemeanor. Over 1,000 is a felony. In California, they just changed this law now, where I think January 1st it'll take effect, where they weren't prosecuting anything for shoplifting. So there was no consequence. So now they just reinstated a law. If you get arrested for the second time for stealing property, I think it's over $750, you're now charged with a felony, because it's just gotten so out of control with the shoplifting.
And see, that's where I think that the pendulum has swung, because it's one thing if you're going to call racial profiling and cops suck and they're unfairly targeting people. You can only carry that storyline for so long. And then at one or another period, something's going to happen to where you're going to see it has nothing to do with racial profile. It has everything to do with the rule of law. And I think when we see these videos where CVS's, Walgreens, Targets, Macy's, all these different stores are actually getting ransacked each and every single day, where guys are going in, girls are going in, they're literally filling up shopping carts filled with toiletries, food, clothing, sneakers, television sets, and they're walking out and nobody's doing anything to them. They're never getting in trouble. And now all of a sudden you want to go to that same store, let's say it's a CVS, and you want to buy a tube of toothpaste. You can't do it because now it's going to be locked up behind a cage. And I think even the people who were screaming at the loudest of this is racial profiling, you got to stop, cops are bad, I think they've now come to terms with that's really not the case. When you don't have rules and you don't have law and order, you don't have society, because that's what differentiates us from other societies, other countries, is that we don't have chaos. With chaos, you have a third world nation. Without chaos, that's how you have the United States of America.
It's unbelievable. And not to mention all these stores are closing. All these, these chain stores, they're all closing. And they're closing in neighborhoods that actually need them. That's the thing. And I don't think people see that.
Well, you're right. It's look. I asked this question earlier in the week I had a guy on. His name was Dr. Carderas, and he's a therapist. And I thought one of the funniest things was that I've seen recently. It's not funny. It's actually sad if you think about it. The New York Yankees unfortunately lost to the LA Dodgers. And what happened in LA? You see all these thugs going in instead of, cheering in the street, girls taking their tops off. Instead, they're ransacking stores and lighting them on fire. And I'm like, what is that? Who does that? I mean, I remember when the Yankees won the World Series. I'm not kidding. In 1996, I was actually at Game 6 when the Yankees won the World Series. And the place was unbelievable. I mean, everybody was screaming. You couldn't even hear. If you were standing next to me, I couldn't hear what you were saying. Wade Boggs was riding on a horse around the field. It was unbelievable. You cleared out and went out into the streets. Girls were taking their tops off, going around naked. I was like, this is the best thing in the world.
The 96 World Series.
96. And nobody ransacked stores. Right? If anything, people went into bars, had cocktails. I remember I went out and I bought a Yankee shirt that was there. Now they tear the place apart. And I think part of it's because they know that they're not going to get in trouble for it.
Actually, that it was actually a lieutenant that he jumped on the back of that horse. That guy recently passed away. There was actually a story in the paper about it because
the cop,
the cop passed away. Yes,
the cop who was yeah.
Right.
So Wade Boggs, the third baseman of the New York Yankees, jumped on the back of a cop who was riding a horse, and they ran around they rode around the stadium. That guy just passed away.
He just recently passed away. I remember seeing an article about it.
It's too bad. It's too bad. But I mean, going back to the changes. Maybe now the pendulum is moving back to where somebody like your son can actually be a police officer again. So I don't think any cop looks to just go to work and do nothing but write speeding tickets, right?
No,
I mean, you want to help people. What's the biggest call that comes in to a police department? What's like it doesn't matter what district, what precinct, you're always going to get these. Is it domestic?
So a domestic, a lot of domestic calls and just a lot of disputes, whether it's, you go into a store and you argue with something that happened in the store, or, you're returning an item, you're not happy, it just turns into a dispute.
Okay.
Stuff like that. And just a lot of calls of service, a car accident, somebody got hurt, somebody got sick.
So if we go to the ones where they escalated, so the domestic abuse, I'd say, if I'm guessing, husband is arguing with the wife, maybe roughs her up a little bit.
Correct.
Is that what it is? Is that the same today for when you used to service one of those calls to where your son services one of those calls? Has that basically stayed the same?
It's actually gotten a little bit stricter. But for the good. That's actually one thing where I think everybody can agree on that, where they've actually created laws and rules pertaining to domestic violence where there is no discretion.
Right.
Where like, hey, me and you got into a fight, you got the best of me, we show up, like, hey, we're going to kind of work it out. In domestic, there's nothing. There's no, one doesn't have to say, I want to arrest. It's just an automatic arrest. Let's go.
It's an automatic arrest.
So, and it's actually gotten stricter.
Has it?
That's actually good.
Rightfully so?
Rightfully so.
Rightfully so. It's funny. We had a story here. Two people I actually know, not friends of mine, but there was a story here locally where a woman, she had cocktailed and she was yelling and being abusive in her words, and they have a young daughter. And the husband, tried to stop. You're going to wake up the baby. You're going to wake up the baby. You're going to wake up the baby. She wouldn't stop. She just started getting out of control. So what he did was he went and tried to put his hand over her mouth to quiet her down. And when he did, she turned her head in such a way that his nail cut her and she started to bleed. Well, because she had too many cocktails in her, she called the cops. And the cops came. And when the cops came, she tried to say to the cops, no, I changed my mind. And they said, we're not going to have it. And they arrested the guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that could go also be a liability thing where, they've created those rules within departments where it's a must arrest. You show up, you have a primary aggressor, there's a visible injury, they're getting arrested. No questions asked.
So here's your one. So one of the things that you had to deal with, and I only know this because you tell me stories. One of the things that you were in charge of at Citi Field was, and I think you had training in this. Didn't you have training about for terrorism?
Yes.
So I don't know if you could get into the nuances of what, and you don't have to give every detail, but overall, from a 30,000 foot view, when you had that training, what kind of stuff were you looking for from a terrorism standpoint?
Well, a lot of the training we had, not so much looking, because it's hard to profile what a terrorist is these days, is how to
They're usually
respond to it,
blue-haired Democrats.
respond to it, and mitigate the threat, and then help anybody that's injured or.
Yeah, but a terror attack is going to be a much bigger thing than that.
It's crazy. It's a crazy world.
So you were looking for certain things that would trigger you to say, this could be a terror attack in the waiting.
Of course, you're always, whether it's just a metal detector set up outside,
Mm-hmm.
just, everybody, see something, say something kind of thing, just always be alert.
Yeah, but now, today, if you see something and you say something, well, maybe that will change with Trump, but people don't say anything anymore because they're afraid to be, labeled as a racist. And so a lot of times, I mean, stuff that Dennis and I see all the time covering the stuff, people say, no, I'm not going to say anything because if I say anything, I could be the next Daniel Penny. I mean, when you look at that story of Penny, let me tell people what Penny is. Daniel Penny served the country honorably, and he was on a train in New York City, and there was a homeless guy who had been arrested, I think, 40, 50, 60 times, and he was harassing everybody, and he kept it up and kept it up, and finally what he did was he took the guy down because he was afraid that the guy was going to hurt somebody, and he held him down until they arrived at the next station, and it turned out to be that while he was holding him down, the guy wound up passing away. Now Daniel Penny is currently right now going through a trial where he's trying to save himself from being in jail for trying to help other people. This is why people don't want to say anything anymore, Gav.
And unfortunately, that's New York City. He's probably going to get convicted.
You think he's going to get convicted?
If it was a different state, maybe not. Maybe wouldn't even have been charged.
But now you know why people don't want to. They don't want to say anything.
Right. Just to go back to the amendment, if we went to a Met or Yankee game when we were kids, you may see the police there.
Yeah.
Now you go to a Met or Yankee game, you're going to see the police there, but they're going to be standing by the gates, and they're going to be in a group of 4 to 6, and they're going to be carrying long guns.
Yeah.
Because that's how they're trying to, omnipresence any person that may come and try to do some kind of act of terrorism.
So it's more of a deterrent visually. When you look at where you are, I mean, the arc that has taken place from, you just said you retired 8 years ago. So you retired right before Trump got in. And now, after Biden has allowed all these people to cross through the border, bringing them in through the parolee program. I mean, there was a statistic that they gave not so long ago. It's crazy. I think there's 13,000 people in the country who are convicted murderers who have been released into the general public. And there's over 16,000 people who are convicted sex offenders, rapists of some kind, and they're allowed in the general public. Would you say, based on those numbers alone, that the heightened fear for a terror attack is greater now than it's ever been?
Absolutely. I mean, you want to say domestic. I know they're foreign, but they're here. Just, I don't know why any liberal or progressive would want those type of people in our country.
Yeah, doesn't make sense.
Why can't we vet people? I don't understand.
Well, that's another thing that New York City did, and a lot of other cities followed New York City. I mean, you used to have the ability to where you could pat somebody down. Now you can't do that anymore, correct?
Well, there are certain circumstances, but now it's gotten so bad, they've created a new report where any contact with anybody on the street. So basically, if anybody ever walked up to you and said, "Hey, can you give me directions someplace?" they want you to take their information because now you had a contact. Because again, it could be who's getting profiled. So the cops these days, it takes them some time. I think they let them take overtime at the end of their shift so they can fill out all their reports of how many contacts they've had during the day.
I mean, it seems like such a waste of energy,
Absolutely.
waste of money. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so again, it just seems like it's another liberal progressive ACLU getting involved to where it makes the job for the cop harder, and where I would imagine to a certain degree demoralizing.
Absolutely. And like we talk about sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
I mean, do people actually know what that is, sanctuary city? I don't know if some people, they talk about it all the time. And it's basically, you could be an illegal immigrant in this country and you get arrested, and you would think, okay, they just got arrested. He's an illegal immigrant. He's going to be in a database, and the police are going to call the public authorities, and they're going to come take him away and deport him. No, we don't call anybody. They get arrested, they get charged. And actually, we could tell them, hey, if you need help defending yourself, we can call your consulate right now and you can request help.
So it seems almost as if they've made just like the Border Patrol. I mean, the Border Patrol has become nothing other than a sophisticated Uber driver. It's like, hey, we picked you up at the border. Now we're going to transport you here to this sign-in building. And then after we sign you in, we're going to transport you over to the bus station, and we're going to let you go somewhere USA. I mean, that's really what the Border Patrol is at this point. It's a processing.
It's like we've established the rules now in our country to support the criminals. Like, we don't care about the victims.
Yeah.
Like, I always say, and something I personally, to myself, when you're on a plane and they're going over the safety stuff, that's before the takeoff. And the one thing they always say, if the oxygen mask comes down, put your own mask on first before you help the person next to you.
Mm-hmm.
And our society, they want us to help everybody else before we can help ourselves.
Yeah.
It's gone backwards.
Well, it's impossible. It's impossible to take. I mean, I always use that scenario of, the reason why they tell you to do that is because if you're not breathing, if you can't have air, you can't help anybody. And so they've squeezed the air out of police officers. They've squeezed the air out of law and order. And I think that's why we've seen such a pendulum shift back over to Trump, where now Trump is going to take place and he's going to take a strong fist to all this stuff. What, as a father of a police officer, what do you hope happens where the sort of Trump attitude has a ripple effect? I mean, we already saw that, you talk about New York City with Mayor Adams. He's been playing to the left, speaks poorly for a moment about open borders. Biden and the DOJ go after him with some kind of crazy, saying that he misaligned or misappropriated funds or whatever it may be. Just it was simply a condition of lawfare. He spoke out against the Biden administration when it came to illegal immigration, and they went after him for talking what he felt. Now, I'm not suggesting by any stretch that he's a conservative. I mean, he's a liberal through and through, Mayor Adams. But as soon as Trump now is elected, what does he do? He turns off the funding for the free meals for the illegal aliens. Do you hope that now with Trump in there, that we'll have that Trump effect, the trickle effect? And if so, what are you hoping for in terms of a change for where police, where the matters of policing is different?
Well, it's funny, just to say how, he starts talking bad about Biden, and next thing you know, he's under federal investigation.
Yeah.
And I know obviously the election's been dominating our news cycle, but there's been really not too much talk about that the last few weeks.
No.
And now all of a sudden Trump's, president-elect, and, he wants to play nice with Trump because he knows, well, if Trump's going to, turn over that whole DOJ and, he wants to make nice.
Of course.
Everything kind of goes away.
It's sickening how it
So
all
we'll
plays,
see.
right? Yeah. And you know what I think Trump will do? Everybody has Trump out to be this horrible person on the left. I think Trump is cognizant of the fact that he's made mistakes in his life, and everybody should have a second chance, right?
Of course.
And I think Trump is of the mindset of, hey, man, you may have destroyed New York City because you were going down this liberal craziness, but now the Wicked Witch is dead, and the Wizard of Oz is dead, and there's a new sheriff in town. And if you could show me that you'll change your colors, and I don't mean from being a black man to a white man, but from being a blue guy to a red guy, If you could change your colors and go back to the law and order and start protecting the cops and getting things done right, we're going to make sure that you're not in trouble. But you got to do the right thing.
Right. Well, look at Letitia James and Kathy Hochul. I mean, right away they come on and they just want to attack the guy.
Want to attack
I
him.
mean, why would you start off like that? It's ridiculous.
Because I think they've gotten so hungry and so thirsty for power, and they've started to believe their own headlines in the sense that they think they're indestructible. I think they've got themselves another thing coming. I mean, that's one area I can't wait to see what happens.
And, you know, go back to my son being a police officer and also bring my daughter into it because she's a nurse. And, you know, it's such a cliche. You know, I was a cop. My son became a cop. My wife was a nurse. My daughter became a nurse. If you ask my wife, personality-wise, if she said, who's going to be the cop, who's going to be the nurse, she would have said the opposite. She would have said, my daughter's going to be the cop and my son's going to be the nurse, just because that's how their personalities are. But obviously, it's how it worked out.
Right.
You know, so everybody says, oh, my God, your son's a cop. You know, you must be a nervous wreck. You must be a nervous wreck. You know, you can't really think that way because you don't want to think somebody is going to go to work every day and, you know, be in harm's way. And although he could be in harm's way. And I think now that Trump is going to be back in there and things will change. And, you know, if the economy gets better and, you know, everything gets moving the way it should be, I think a lot of these things will change. It's not going to happen overnight. It'll change slowly. And maybe we'll kind of go back to a little bit of that, you know, hey, let's respect the police. We can't do these things. And maybe, you know, some of the states and even some of the, you know, the blue states like California is changing some of their laws. And we'll kind of get back to a normal, let the pendulum swing. You know, I don't want to say let it swing, right? Let it swing normally the way it should be.
Right. A little bit right, a little bit left, make everybody sort of in harmony.
And everybody's never going to agree on everything. And that's okay.
But one thing everybody needs to agree on, and this is where I think so many things have gotten out of control. If we don't have authority, and it doesn't matter what that authority is, it could be kids having respect for their parents. It could be kids having respect for their teachers. It could be me having respect for the president, or having, you know, respect for cops, or whatever. Until we have that back in place, until we go back to law and order, you cannot have a functional society. So cops have to be empowered again to enforce the law and to not be looked at as pigs and as these are some people who are just trying to beat the hell out of it. I mean, I think you'd be the first one to say periodically you do get a bad cop in there.
Of course. You're always going to have a bad apple.
Right. But that's not the...
And you know what? Cops, they want to get rid of that guy.
They do.
Because it makes them, like you said, 99.9% of them do their job. They do their job well. And it's that one bad guy that does something bad, and it just makes the whole situation for everybody not good.
Right. And well, one of the things is with social media, I think social media has hurt the police as much as it's hurt any group. And the reason being is because I could have 10 videos of 10 cops helping the guy who's stranded on the side of the road, fixing his tire, giving birth to a woman in a car, saving somebody from a fire, you know, doing whatever it is. But they don't get traction online. The ones that get traction online is the one bad rogue cop who's going to beat the crap out of somebody simply because, like, we just saw it. It was a video of cops beating up on people at a football game last weekend. And those videos went absolutely viral, absolutely viral. So what winds up happening is that the videos of cops beating somebody or tasering somebody, or, you know, maybe going too gun happy and shooting somebody is always going to take precedent. That one video is going to take precedent versus the 1,000 other ones that show cops in good light.
You know what? Even those good things that those cops do, they probably don't want any accolades for it.
Right.
You know, I'm sure here in Vero Beach, you know, I bet you once a week there's some miraculous thing that some cop does. You know, whether it be he responds to somebody that's having a heart attack and he's got a defibrillator in the car, and he takes that defibrillator and he brings that guy back to life. You know, you probably don't hear about that. And that happens probably every day in our country.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in fact, it's funny because we've made heroes to be rock stars, athletes, and actors and actresses, when really the heroes are the cops and the first responders. They get paid very little. They have, like you said, I mean, anybody who's a cop today has to worry about whether or not, they're one day away from getting shot and killed, or one day away from arresting the wrong person who's going to file a suit against them. And all of a sudden, before you know it, you've lost your freedom, you've lost your badge, you've lost your gun, you lost your pension, you lost everything because you were just simply trying to do your job. That's not the way it's supposed to be.
Just one stat I'd like to read if I can.
Yeah.
A couple of things I wrote down. Since 2017, New York State has paroled 41 cop killers. I mean, can you imagine?
So wait, so that means that 41 cops were killed by somebody, and yet they were allowed to go free.
Go free. That's in New York State, 41. And of those 41, 33 were NYPD cops. It's unthinkable. And, one that, maybe you don't recall, but one that stinks out at me is a police officer, Eddie Burns. He was shot and killed.
I remember Burns
guarding a witness to a trial for a drug dealer. He lived one town over from where we grew up.
Yeah.
And some of the people involved in his case, they've been paroled. I mean, it's unfathomable that we let cop killers out of jail. And again, there's no the consequences are, you could say, you know what, I could kill a cop, I'll be out of jail in 20, 30 years. No big deal. I'm only 20. I'll be 50 when I'm out of jail.
It's unbelievable. There was a guy who just wound up getting, for January 6th, I think he just wound up getting 13 years in jail, maybe even longer than that. So think about that. Maybe you broke a window in the Capitol. You're going to go for 13 years to jail. And meanwhile, you killed a cop and you're going to be released on parole. This is why I think the DA, and Denny was just bringing up Gashon, is gone. Because people, and I don't care who you are on the left or right, you look at that and you just recognize something's wrong there. Now, with that said, we only have about 15 minutes left. I want to talk, you and I were discussing what we're going to talk about on here, and I thought that a good theme would be, we've talked about this in terms of how danger has been able to run wild here in the United States, whether it's illegal aliens, criminals, bad DAs, bad lawmakers. Ultimately, because we've known each other for 40 plus years, we've kind of seen the changes that have taken place, right? I mean, here it is. You guys, you saw my kids be born. I saw your kids be born. When you look at today, and we haven't had this conversation, you and I. So when you look at today and you look at yesterday, you think it was a better time to live when we were kids and when we were growing up, getting married, or do you think it's a better time today?
I think 100% it was better when we were kids.
Oh, yeah.
It was just different. I mean, listen, your oldest child, he's 29 years old. I'm sure every night you're like, oh, I wonder what Danny's doing. Is he all right?
All the time.
Because your kids are not with you all the time. So you're just wondering, what are they doing? Are they safe?
Yeah.
Are they doing the right thing?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying our parents didn't think like that.
Yeah.
But it was just different.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say.
You
it
knew
was
they
different.
they knew
like,
we were
our
coming home.
parents used to tell us things. Oh, we used to walk to school in a foot of snow.
Yeah.
Now it snows an inch. Everybody gets a week off.
That's true. That's true.
I know it's funny how we're now become those people. Like it's, you don't even know how it was, how we had it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I go back to, we take our kids, we took our kids everywhere.
Yeah.
There was always a designated parent driver who's driving, who's picking up. If we didn't take our bikes there, we weren't going.
That's right.
We drove our bicycles everywhere. And you know what? We lived probably about a mile and a half away
From each other, yeah, growing up.
Although it was the next town, it was very close. Like, and there was no cell phones back then. And,
My mother
I would have to ride my bike to your house, knock on your door. Hopefully somebody was home.
Yeah.
And maybe, oh, Dennis isn't home. He went to his cousin's house for the day.
Well, I used to drive to your house more than you drove to my house because we had another friend that lived across the street from you. So it was always me, you, and Jeff. And so, you know how many times, countless times, I got on my bike and drove to your house because my mother wouldn't let me use the phone because you were in another exchange and it would cost more money to make that phone call.
I do recall that. That's funny.
And I used to drive to your house. I'd knock on the door, clank, 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 clank. Your dad would come out or your mom would come out. And I'd be like, Where's John? Oh, he left with Jeff. I'm like, really? And it wasn't like you screwed me. You just didn't know I was coming.
Right.
And then I'd be like, do you know where they went? And then your mother would be like, no, I really don't. Nowadays, if I even did that, your mother would be like, well, let me track him on the phone. Let me see where he is. And I'd be able to see that maybe you were at Jimbo's house and I could go to Jim's house. So there are advantages today to have that social media and technology for the kid who's on the bike. But let's be honest, when was the last time, I defy you, when was the last time you saw a kid or two kids or three kids on a 10-speed riding through the streets?
You know,
when was the last time you saw it?
I do think during the pandemic, it came back a little bit because there was nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So you would see these kids, and it was weird. They were like these weird kind of bicycles, these kind of mountain bike looking bikes, but they had those big giant tires on them.
Yeah.
So we used to sit out front and we used to laugh. Like, oh my God, a kid on a bike. I haven't seen a kid on a bike in a couple of years.
Wait, I'll add one to that. When was the last time, and I'm telling you, I could give you my answer already, and I'm going to say 55. I'm going to say it's probably 30 plus years. When was the last time you saw a kid on a bike riding somebody on their handlebars?
How about a bike? Denny, Ryan, do you guys have your own bicycles? Like, honestly, and when was the last time you remembered riding your bicycles?
Last time I was on a bike, Dad sliced
I know this story.
sliced my foot in half. Almost sliced my Achilles. I think that was the last time I rode on the back of a bike.
So wait, let's tell this story. So I don't know if you got to know this. So Ryan had a baseball game, and I went up on my bicycle. Mary was there in the car. Mary went home. I said, I'll take Ryan home on the bike. She said, okay, fine. But I put Ryan on the back of the bike.
I remember this.
Yeah. So Ryan was sitting on the seat, and I was standing up. And he didn't put his feet correctly on the sides. And so instead, he dangled his foot, and his leg got caught in the spoke. He fell down, and his ankle's bleeding, but I can't see it because the sock is over it. I'm like, come on, you're such a freaking, and I called him like 10 names that you're not allowed to say anymore. You know, you can't say those names anymore, right? I mean, back in our day, I'll say it. Back in our day, I would have called him a faggot, queer. That's the way we talked. Today, I just say you're a wimp, right?
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, we get home, and Mary's like, what's wrong with you? We took him to the hospital, and like, I almost tore off his entire
My
Achilles.
heel is hanging from my
His heel
foot.
is hanging off. And
Because
we were at the
the-
hospital. I was
And
so,
you know, there was
The bike
always,
chain
you know,
sliced through it.
yeah, but you know what? You tough and you were tough.
You made me walk like halfway home from the field, and Mom picked me up, and then she took the sock off. My heel is just
Yeah,
dangling.
but you know, here's the difference though. That built character.
I think the doctor said, he was like, yeah, you're a hair away from slicing your Achilles.
But it built character. Tough, and it kept you tough. In today's day and age,
Kept me in a
oh my-
cast for 10 weeks.
All right. And you know what? Is he running around the bases okay today? You know what I mean? He's okay. He's okay. You know what I mean? When we were kids, we used to climb up on the roof. Remember we climb up on the roof? You climb up on the roof?
I remember like going to the baseball fields and climbing up on the backstops.
Yeah, you climb on the backstops. What about the same thing when you're doing pool hopping? Remember when we were kids, we'd
Yeah.
freaking go pool hopping? When was the last time somebody came and jumped in your pool illegally? I'd give anything for a kid to jump in my pool
I
today.
did that in high school.
You did
Pool
that in high
hopping. Yeah.
Yeah, but you were in high school how many years ago?
And you know, it's
6.
not all that. I don't want to throw them all under the bus because it's not all their fault.
I agree.
You know, it's just, I don't know what it is. It's just, we've changed, I guess, a little bit, you know, like, because you want to take care of your family, you know, that's it. You
Yeah,
wanna
but our
take care of
parents
them.
wanted to take care of us too.
True.
You know? But I mean, I'll give you an example. Last night, Kelly had lacrosse practice. So Kelly's had her driver's license for like 2 weeks. So I know lacrosse practice ends at 7:30. Immediately, I'm on my app and I am tracking her and I am watching her the whole way. You know, and I see she stops at the stop signs. She stops at the red lights. No, I don't mean I don't see her, but I just see it says KL on my phone. And I watched it for 20 minutes for her to get home. And then finally, when she got home, I put my phone down. I'm like, my God, my mother never did that. Even if I was late. When my mother said to me, my mother used to say to me, be home when the light posts came on. And I would never. You know what I used to do to my mother all the time? I think you probably did the same shit. So we would be, this is perfect stuff, Gav. So Gav and I, we were in high school. And we would drink on the weekends, right? And then my mother would say, be home by 12. And at 12 o'clock, I was still having too much fun. So I was like, I got to stretch this to 12:45. So what I would do is I would drive home, and just before I got home, I would go to the side and I would put the grease from my chain,
right.
on my hand, and then walk in and be like, "Mom, my chain fell off." She knew I was full of shit, but it is what it is. Nowadays, was I cool, Ryan, when you came home and you drank?
Were you cool?
Yeah, was I cool?
No,
Not at all, right?
not at all. No.
What were you like with your kids when they did that stuff?
You know, it's just, you just didn't want it to be like you.
Dude.
I mean, I think we all knew, like, you know, hey, these kids are going out, they're having their experiences. It's all part of life. You just hope it didn't get too crazy and they didn't do anything stupid or get hurt, you know. And, you know, kids today, they do excessive.
I don't
they
know.
go all in and they go crazy.
Wait a second. So, Denny, I'm going to ask you and Ryan 2 stories. So you heard what Gap just said. You guys go crazy and we didn't go crazy. When you look back on times when, you know, like the Gavins would come to our house and you'd be there with, you know, his kids and, you know, Gav and Nina, me and Mary, maybe we had some other friends there as well. Did you guys like ever say our parents are doing this or doing that? I mean, what did you used to see us do?
I don't think I understood the concept of drinking when I was that young.
What do you mean?
Like I don't think I understood like the concept of like, you know, drinking and partying.
So you couldn't
Maybe
tell
Denny more because he's 5 years older than me. But
yeah, so Denny, what did you used to like? There's a classic picture. In fact, I think we have. If we have it, I'll have Ryan toss it up. There's a classic picture. I know we have it. It's upstairs on the refrigerator by our pool table, and it's a picture of all you 3 and his 2 kids. And I'm not saying your kids' names to keep them private. And the 5 of you are standing on a cliff in Montauk, and it's a bar called the Montaukett. And I remember exactly what we did. We told you guys to go play on the cliff. I mean, the cliff is about 100 to 150 feet high. Told you to go play on a cliff where there was this stuff, and I think the 4 of us were sitting at a picnic table drinking. Do you remember? The picture's there, and every time I look at the picture, I say, "Oh my God, what were we thinking?" Do you remember that, Dennis?
The when we went to the Montaukett together, yeah, I remember that night. But that's the thing. I think when I was a kid back then, I was never really thinking so much about what you guys were up to as much as like what we were all doing at the time. Rather, just like playing, running around, doing some kind of like game that we would, you know, try and just like we weren't like, oh, they're all over there getting shit faced secretly, like while we're like, you know, playing on the playground or something like that. So I wasn't usually wondering too much.
I don't think we like comprehended it.
Were you able to get away with stuff?
I think it was more like, oh, they're busy like talking. We can go do stuff.
So you thought we were talking about stuff?
I mean, if you guys are at a table hanging out, we're just like, oh, they're doing parent things.
All right, so we're going to go around the table real quick. We got 5 minutes left, so each one of you guys get 1 minute. I'm going to put this on you now and think about it. So when you go back over the course of time, what is the one story that you remember the most with either the Gavin family and the Lynch family together or Gav and I? What's your one, Gav?
I remember kind of, it was, I think Ryan was maybe 2 or 3 years old. So it's got to be 20 plus years, 22 years ago. And it was kind of like the first time that we, you know, you were started doing these trips, and it was in the Cape. You rented a house in the Cape.
So I would, all right. So you got a little bit.
I remember that.
Wait,
yeah.
you got a little Mary syndrome right now, because Mary never tells the story. So I used to start these trips where we would get a bunch of families together, and we go, and I'd always spearhead where we were going, and I'd put all the details together, and we'd have a cluster of families go and stay under one roof.
Right. So you know, I was maybe a little bit lower on the food chain. You were a little bit higher. So
you mean on the earnings chain?
Earnings chain.
Yeah.
So you would have these trips, and then I think, you know, maybe you'd rent the house for a week and say, hey, Gav, we rented this house for a week. Why don't you guys come up for like 3-4 days and hang out with us?
Yeah.
And, you know, we would come up and kind of ride the coattails of that rental.
Yeah.
And really, and Nina talks about this all the time, we were up on this big, huge house in the Cape, and
On
it
a
was
cliff.
over on a cliff.
Yeah.
and there was this huge flagpole.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it was set up something, and you were just swinging the kids around this flagpole.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I specifically remember that, you just swinging the kids around.
I think we have a
And
picture of
then-
that. Yeah.
There was another day where we went out in a rowboat,
I remember this.
and I think it was myself, you, Denny, and my son.
Yeah.
And it's funny now how so many great white sharks are going to that area now. How many great white sharks were probably swimming around right by us? And we went out pretty far. Like,
We
we
did.
probably went out, gone for several hours, probably
Yeah.
a couple miles away.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that kind of started like us really hanging out more back then
With the families.
with the families.
Yeah.
And then it kind of led to some other yearly trips.
Yeah. It's funny you're talking about that. So when I was a kid, I grew up and my grammar school was Fork Lane, and the flagpole had this rope, like any flagpole now, where you pull the rope. And so what we used to do is we used to use the rope as like a swing, and somebody would just swing you around, and the rope, because the flagpole would have it, and we would just go around and around. So when we went to that place in Massachusetts and I saw that flagpole, I started taking all the little kids and doing it. And they were like, they had never had anything like that in their lives before. So I remember that. My
It's
God.
just one of those things that
Yeah.
every once in a while, we're sitting around and we're just being a little nostalgic, and that story seems to always come up.
So your kids remember that.
They remember it absolutely,
They remember
100%.
it. Doing on a flagpole.
And Ryan was, obviously Kelly wasn't around yet, but Ryan, he was a kid, a baby.
Baby.
I want to say he was a
I would-
baby.
we have a
almost.
picture of you in my, I think I have it on Facebook.
It's so
Yeah.
weird because your memory, you can't really go far that back or
Yeah.
go back that far. And I remember being on the flagpole.
You do remember.
And I
fu-
was like 3 years old. I don't know why. Maybe it was like one of the greatest moments of my 3-year-old life. But
well, there's a picture.
I have like a little memory of like looking at the flagpole and like being kind of elevated on it.
We've got pictures of this. You got to toss these up. I mean, I know there's a picture of Instagram where you and I are sitting in the water and you're in my lap. That's the trip you're talking about. Do you remember? Because the next day we went to the beach. Remember that small, it was a calm beach. It was almost like a bay. And we were all hanging in the water the whole day. Do you remember that?
Was that Bathtub Beach or something?
Yeah, it was
Something
Bathtub
like
Beach or
that?
something like that. Yeah, yeah. It was great.
Where
Let
it
the
was
kids-
low tide, but the water stays in, and your chairs are in like a foot of water.
Yeah, yeah. It was great.
I 100% remember
It was
that.
great. Denny, what's the memory you remember?
I remember Jamaica. When we went outside of the resort, I think to do the cliff jumping.
Oh my God, you remember that?
You know what? Now that you just said that, that's a close second. So, if I could tell the story, just to add on here, Dennis and I, we went to Jamaica when we were like 18, 19 years old.
Right out of high, no, not even right out of high
We
school.
went to hedonism.
Yeah.
You could Google that.
Yeah.
And, over 20 years later, we go back to Jamaica, not to hedonism, obviously.
No.
And we went to this place called Cliffs. Was it Cliffs something?
Rick's Cafe.
Rick's Cafe. Rick's Cafe. So back then, it was just a little roadside dive bar in Jamaica on the side of the road where you jump off the cliff into the water. And I think back then it was
Or
probably,
dive off, because I remember diving off.
And then we bring our kids back, 20
plus years. Yeah.
plus years later. And now it's a big kind of a commercialized place
Tourist
where
attraction,
they actually
yeah.
have platforms, one low platform, one high platform. And we got to jump off that same cliff with our kids.
Yeah.
That's a great one, Denny.
Yeah.
That's a great
Yeah,
one.
I was thinking about it. It was so cool leaving the resort, driving there, and then going to the cliffs. And
I remember how, I think me and you just jumped right in.
Yeah.
And we had to kind of get our kids up
We had to
there
coax
and-
them.
And coax them
And
to
that's
go in.
like what I remember too. Like that's why with that question you asked, like I remember, I could be remembering somewhat incorrectly. Like there was a big dinner table like one night where everyone was like seated eating dinner, and like
That was at Rick's Cafe.
maybe, or I don't know. I think it was the resort because we were outside, and I just remember us kids wanting to get the hell off the table to go like play at the after hours of like the water park and go on the slides and stuff like that.
Well,
But,
no,
like,
that trip, I was going to say Jamaica too, but we snuck in, or the pool closed, and there was
Yes, and
security
we-
walking
and we
around.
would-
and
yes, I remember
we all went and
the
snuck
five
in.
of us,
So-
and then the other kids on that trip tried like sneaking in.
Well,
on
I
the after
know what it
hours.
was. So that resort had a river pool. And so if I remember correctly, Gav and I were like, come on, guys, we're going to go in. Now, there were other families, not just us.
right.
but we went into that river pool and let you guys all come into the river pool, and we were trying to go incognito
Yes.
because the security guards were all walking
Yeah.
around. You weren't allowed to be in the pool, and we were pretending like we were back in the bush, like in Vietnam or something like
Yeah.
that. That was a lot of
That
fun.
was fun.
But do you remember going to Rick's Cafe when we were driving there? All the armed soldiers were on the
I was
side.
going to just add on to it because I now remember it was 17 years ago because Mary was pregnant. I remember she was pregnant at that time with Kelly. So she's 16, that just turned 16, right? So
Yeah.
it was probably 17 years ago. And the resort we were staying at to go to this Rick's Cafe was about a 2-hour drive.
Yeah.
So we hired some guy that had a van to drive us. And, these kids probably don't remember, but I remember driving and it was probably something that's a little scary today. You may want to think twice about doing that today.
I don't think you'd want to do it at all. Yeah, it's funny. See, now it's when I go back and I think about all the memories and stuff like that. So for me, I don't have that one specific. I just remember always, we'd always go to the beach. The kids would be out there on the little boogie boards or whatever. You and I would be sitting on the. I mean, we had really cool wives. That's the one thing I'd say. You and I would always be on the beach, backing down beers, like left and right, and the wives would never give us any hard time, and the kids wouldn't know the different. They wouldn't know the different, right? So, and who knows? That's what, like, I don't even know if they'll reveal it, but I got to assume that they probably did shit that we don't know that they
Of
did.
course.
Yeah, at least I hope you did. Yeah,
You know what, then,
how much
honestly?
shit we used to do?
You know
We
what
used to do
then?
crazy
Honestly,
shit.
every time we've gone someplace, something happens that it's memorable. Whether it's good, bad, or even just, I remember being out in, at East Hampton, and we're at the beach with the kids, and who walks up and puts the towel next to us? Alec Baldwin. Do you recall that?
Oh, yeah.
We were like swimming in the ocean with him.
Yeah. Friggin' beached whale. Yeah. Oh my God. There's a lot of good stuff. Any other memories that you remember? Dennis? Ryan?
I mean, just mostly to the Massapequa house, like having like you guys over and
Super
like
Bowls.
Yeah, the Super Bowls, like movie nights, like where you guys would just be hanging out and we would be like just doing our own thing.
See, that shit doesn't happen anymore.
You know what I remember too? Like I
Flip-flops.
know we
Right.
went out to go see the first James Bond movie. I remember we had done that together, Casino Royale. I don't know why, just randomly that memory came to my head because I'm like trying to think of like all this stuff, but. Yeah, no, I mean, I remember mostly remember you guys adults like going to do your thing and we would like always sneak off and like go do something else.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. Like even today, I wonder if that's same. I wonder if is that the post office?
Post office.
I wonder if the same sort of concept, if that still happens today. Does that happen where kids are doing fun things while their parents are hanging out? I just think everybody's so protective and making sure that they're not getting in trouble and that, like everybody's tracked. We never tracked our kids. I didn't track my kids. I never tracked my kids. I remember one time Ryan did. How much time we got? 2 minutes. I remember one night, Ryan, that you were at a party and the cops were called, and I had to get you out of a party. The cops were there and they were pissed off because nobody was home, and I made you pay for it severely when we got home in the backyard. Correct?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
I remember you trying to fight me.
Yeah, I tried to what?
Fight me.
I didn't try to fight you, Ryan. Trust me.
Kept
I don't need to
saying-
try to fight you, Ryan. I
Something
think I
about, like,
manhandled
if
you.
you think you're a man or something, like you think you're like man enough to drink.
Yeah, I said
If
to her,
you're
I said,
man
"Do you
enough
man
to
enough to
throw
drink?"
a punch at me or something.
Yeah, see,
And then you started tossing me around.
now here's the killer part of that is because when we were kids, when was the first time you drank?
Probably, probably ninth grade, we started really getting into it. I don't know. Was it before then that we really started?
I think the first time I ever drank was probably in 9th grade, 10th grade, like in the bleachers.
So we're probably
We used to have the little nips. Remember the little nip beers?
14 years old, right?
Yeah, 14 years old. And so we started drinking. So the crazy thing is that, when my kids started drinking, they were in high school. It wasn't like I didn't want them to do it because I didn't want them to do what we
Right.
did, even though we had a shit full of fun. It was my wife. Mary's like, Dennis, they're drinking. And there was a part of me be like, yeah, all right. So did I. But so then I had to used to play the tough guy, the bad dad. Look at Ryan, he's rolling his eyes.
But you know what? Again, our big
It was
thing
all
was
you- it
beer.
was you,
we're
not
drinking
Mom.
beer. These kids now,
Yeah.
I'm sure even these kids in high school, who's getting the hard booze, who's getting the bottles of wine. What happens to going to, the 7-Eleven, standing outside, seeing some guy who's old enough to drink and say, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you get us a case of beer?
Yeah.
And sometimes you would get the guy, yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
You'd hand him some money and he'd come out and he'd meet you on the side and he'd give you the beer.
Other times you get a scolding. It's all good stuff.
Now I'm sure those kids are just going through their parents' refrigerator, their liquor cabinet, the wine refrigerator,
How many
taking
times?
whatever.
How many times, Dennis, have you guys stolen? Because you've done it as adults. How many times have you taken stuff out of my my stash of alcohol? Look at Denny's face. Look at Denny's face. You see Dennis's face?
So there was a few times back in the day, like when I was a kid.
See, I never knew.
He seems nervous saying it.
In high school, yeah.
I think it was more of my friends taking their parents' alcohol.
Good answer, Ryan.
Yeah.
Good
I
answer.
don't think I took any of yours.
Good answer, Ryan. So, all right, last thing, Gav. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to tell the story of the first, how it is our relationship started. And if you are inaccurate, I am going to fix this story. Go ahead.
So I guess we went to, I started going to Catholic school, Holy Family, in 4th grade. And I guess Dennis started coming in 7th. You came in 7th grade, correct?
Say again.
7th grade? 7th grade, right? Holy Family? That's kind of where the friendship developed. And, sometimes,
7th grade. 7th grade.
Friendships always develop as a little adversarial.
So far, you're on target.
So always the new kid. I don't want to say bully.
I was the
because
new kid.
You were the new kid.
Yeah.
I don't want to say bully because I'm not a bully.
Oh, all right. I wasn't bullied.
So maybe you should tell a story. You're gonna tell it more
And I'll
better
go quicker.
accurately.
So you tell me if I'm wrong. So I come from public school. You guys are all in Catholic school. My father makes me go to Catholic school because there was a lot of drugs in the public school. And so I come in and there were 2 girls. We won't say their last names, but one was Kelly and one was Lorraine. And do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Okay. And so they were 2 of the popular girls, I'm guessing. And so when I came in, because I'm the new guy, they sort of kind of liked me. And so you guys, you and the majority of the guys, didn't like the fact that I came in and 2 of these girls liked me. And then I walked home Kelly, and Kelly and I happened to kiss. And one guy named Rob Zoyne didn't like this idea. And he told you guys, and then this big, huge thing came up that I forced Kelly to kiss her. I remember this like yesterday. And then you, spearheading it with a lot of other guys, called me out. And I went home and told my father that everybody wanted to beat me up. And my father told me straight out, you're going to fight them. And I said, no, I don't want to fight them. Can I go back to, I want to go back. I want to go to Hicksville High School. I don't want to go to Holy Family. And he said, no, you're going to go. You're either going to go face them or you're going to face me. And then he said, I'll give you one thing. You can call your cousin Billy. So my cousin Billy, we were in 7th grade. My cousin Billy was in 8th grade. So, and who, by the way, Billy lived right down the block from you.
Correct.
All right. And then Billy and I went up to Dutch Lane School where you and a whole group of kids were there. And I had a face off with Rob Zoyne and I beat Rob Zoyne. But my father said to me, beat him, but don't kill him. And I beat him and didn't kill him. And then I guess like the next day you invited me to come to your house for a party. And then when I came to your house for a party, we became friends and you had your brother, if I'm not mistaken. So then what ended up happening was that you invited me to your house for a party and you had your young brother, Brian, grab my balls. And then we were friends. Did I hit it pretty right?
Well, the ball part, I don't know. I don't even know why you brought that into the story. It was such a really good story until you brought that in. Why'd you remember that, Dan?
Because it was so unique. And then I think like 2 years later, or maybe not even 2 years later, like 3-4 years later in high school, my mother kicked me out of the house and then your family took me in. So do I have that all right?
You do have it all right. And here we are today.
All right. So listen, Gav uses DML CBD. He could tell you. DMLCBD.com/BOGO, BOGO, buy one, get one free. That ends on Friday. So today's Friday. It ends on Sunday. So buy one, get one free, site-wide BOGO. If you do not buy something by Sunday, you are going to be waiting a long time, because pretty much going to wait until Trump gets inaugurated until we feel more comfortable about the economy. So dmlcbd.com/BOGO, B-O-G-O. Gav, you use it. What do you use it for?
I use it for a lot of things these days.
Do you? It doesn't help with ED.
I don't have a problem in that field.
It's good to know. All right. So that being said, dmlcbd.com. That's it. We'll see you on Friday, God willing. No, on Monday. Today's Friday. My God, I'm having a hard time. We'll see you on Monday, God willing. Until then, enjoy your weekend. May God bless you, our troops, President Trump, and of course, Gav.
And all those cops out there, God bless you. Get home to your family safe every day.
Bingo. We'll talk to you soon.
Get the Dennis Michael Lynch podcast every day by subscribing on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and download the DML News app from the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store for breaking news, merchandise, films, exclusive content, and Team DML.